Hi, everyone. Welcome to Consultants 101, Help Us Help You. Now, we're going to start off first and foremost with we want this session to be interactive. So if you do have any questions kind of queued up in your head, go ahead and pop those into the Q&A panel and we'll get to those first. But let's go ahead and start introducing ourselves. I'm Anthony Nocentino. I'm a consultant and trainer at Centino Systems. I've been consulting full-time since about 2008. And so I have a lot of experience to bring to the table. So go ahead and pop those questions into Q&A. I'm going to kick it over to Monica to introduce herself. Go ahead, Monica.
Hey, everybody. I'm Monica Rathbun. I've been a consultant now for about 5 years. Been working as a DBA for blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to tell you my age, a really long time. But I have a lot of experience from being a DBA and a consultant. And I'm really looking forward to talking with the rest of these renowned consultants here as part of this chat. I'm looking forward to a really fun hour and a half or hour and 15 minutes.
I'll go next. Sorry. Oh, you go. John, you go.
Okay. All right. I'm John Morehouse. I am a consultant with Denny Charon Associates. Between my X number of years, like Monica, I'm not going to tell you because I'm old, of IT work, I've been a consultant for 7, 8, 9 years total. So looking forward to this chat and yeah, it'll be good times.
I guess it's me. Okay. I'm Matt Gordon. I was a consultant for 5 years, and I'm now the director of database management at Rev.io. So I'm going to tell you the other four's dirty secrets and all that now that I'm not a consultant. That's not true. But anyway.
And my name is Erin Stellato. I'm a consultant for SQL Skills. I've been at SQL Skills for over 8 years at this point. And prior to that, I worked for a software company, for a vendor. So I've had a lot of time, and I was there for almost 10 years, had to do the math there, almost 10 years. So I have a lot of experience from that side of the table, managing the relationship with consultants from my company and from other companies as well. So looking forward to seeing what questions you all have today. Anthony, you're on mute.
You know, it's like 2020, right?
Yeah.
So, right. I'm a professional. Watch out. So I have a kickoff question. I think it's maybe a softball to get us all started. What's the most critical thing for you as a consultant for a successful engagement? Like when you walk into that client site, maybe the first time or have that first kickoff call, what's the biggest thing that you want to get into first that drives success?
Oh.
There has to be buy-in.
Yes,
Like,
buy-in from everybody.
The disconnect that I saw a lot is maybe somebody at a certain level higher up, executive management, something like that, identified the issue, brought you in to fix it, and nobody else wants you there. And they didn't lay the groundwork for you to be there. So it's a constant like tug of war, and they don't get the value out of it. They should, because you spend more of your time arguing than just executing the work and fixing whatever wasn't right. So yeah, for me, whoever brings you in, making sure that the whole team is bought in, that when I didn't have that, it was endlessly frustrating.
Oh, I can tell you, I've run into that so many times where management wants to bring a consulting company in, but the person that you're actually going to be reviewing the work for, or that you'll be working with, doesn't want you there. So you're butting heads constantly, or you're finding flaws in their work because that's kind of your job to kind of go in and find the rough patches, and you need to fix the things that they've brought you in. And when you don't have the buy-in from all the players, and it can get messy. It can get messy. So part of that too is one of the companies I used to work for, consulting was a taboo word. You did not want to bring a consultant in at all because that consultant was going to take your job. They were going to prove you didn't know what you were doing. They were going to discover the stuff you've been hiding, right? That kind of thing. But guess what, you guys? I don't want their job. Do you guys want their job? I don't want
the way you said that. I don't want their job. I think that's a great segue into one of the things that I think is most important, which is the expectations. And from both sides, right? Like as Monica said, I don't want your job. I want to help you do your job better. I'm going to teach you how to fish. So for me, I want to know what problem we're trying to solve. So I want to understand the scope. I want to understand your timeline and have that all laid out. That helps a successful engagement move forward and find closure in the end. Because I don't expect that we're consulting forever, right? We're coming in typically to solve a problem. Sometimes we have longer engagements, but I want to know what needs to be done. And then that's what we're going to attack.
Yeah, for me, it's always people, right? Getting folks to buy in is huge. Positivity is huge. But in the end, and kind of bringing what Aaron said there, is I'm here to help you with this thing right now, and then hopefully give it back to you to grow and foster, and then come back to me later with a bigger, cooler problem, right? That's kind of what I like to see as a consultant. And that's actually a segue into another question that I had later on in our kind of our seed list is how much of education is part of your actual consulting? You just kind of come in and click buttons and run really cool queries, or do you really kind of foster education with the people that you're working with? And I know a bunch of you are trainers, so I think I might know the answer to this question.
But I think that depends, right? So like it depends on what the engagement is, so I've got some
Yeah.
clients where I am just their DBA. They have no other, they don't want to learn it, so I just do it. And I've got other engagements where I'm helping with a specific aspect of a project, and they are usually very much interested in learning. And so those projects, I'm doing a ton of educational or knowledge transfer to them, because I really want to work myself out of a job with them. I know that sounds kind of funny from a consulting perspective, but I really want to make them, kind of what Aaron said, I want to make them successful where they don't need me. I can move on to other engagements, other projects, and they continue to be successful without me, hand holding them the entire way.
Absolutely. I'm with you. I really want to do that knowledge transfer. I want to teach whoever I'm working with how to do stuff so I don't have to be there. I want to get in, help you get out, whatever I need to do to make you successful and carry forward when I deliver whatever the deliverable is. I want you to be able to grab it and go. I don't want to just come in with my, whatever technical expertise and not share it. I'm going to, educate them as much as possible.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what John said, is especially when I engage initially, I'll ask the project leadership, like, where do you want this on the dial? Do you want me to just kind of come in as a surgical strike, or do we want to make this some more of an educational experience? So John, that's a pretty good, valuable point. So we do have some questions from the field. So let's go ahead and walk through a couple of those. This one I think is easily the hardest question that we're going to handle today. And it's from Rob. Hello, Rob. How do you find clients? Whew. Right?
So
doing this?
Yeah, doing this.
Exactly. Outbound marketing.
Right.
Yes.
So presenting at not just conferences, right, but SQL Saturdays, user group sessions is one way. Marketing through our own website is another way. Responding to questions on Twitter, right, to SQL Help is another way that we've heard from people. But I would have to say that there's some percentage that definitely comes from people who've interacted with us at conferences and events and then have followed up. And what I really like about that is when I get to meet somebody in person, which rarely happens these days, right? But even historically, a lot of our work is done remotely. We don't go on site. So for me, I really like that relationship that develops, even if it's over a short period of time, and getting to meet somebody either before we've engaged or after is really kind of a nice bonus to consulting that doesn't happen a lot. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you guys have other ways that you're.
The only other thing I would probably add, and I think your list is 100% accurate, I find the friend of a friend. Because we're kind of
girls all the way.
Somebody has an issue, but they know somebody else who's in the community who knows me, or Monica, or you, or somebody who can do the work. And so we get those random drive-by emails or contacts on our blogs. Hey, I'm looking for X, Y, and X, Y, and Z resource. Hey, I need Power BI. Yeah, not me. Call Megan.
We've also had, yeah, I've had a couple software vendors that we've worked with who have then referred other customers of theirs to us as well. So there's a few sources.
Yeah, same thing. A lot of times it's speaking, right? Sharing your knowledge. That's how you find people that are expertise in a particular thing, right? Going to sessions like these or other ones where you figure out where you can get your resource for whatever topic you need, right? It's the best way.
Yeah, for me, the main thing for finding clients is 1, outbound marketing, and 2, blogging. You'd be surprised, just even organically, how, without sounding, I don't know, but you establish your domain expertise on a thing, right? And each one of us has a thing that we're really, really good at, that we're probably known for in the community, if not more than one thing. And so you become the go-to resource. And that query store is one person on this call, and hopefully I'm pointing at the right box. And so you get that idea. When it comes to that, so blog, we probably all started off in our careers in there. Then next, it was speaking, and then here we are at the biggest conference in our community. So good questions there. So I have a question from the audience that is actually on our list. So I'm going to pop that one to the top of the stack. Have you ever had to fire a difficult client? And if so, can you provide some examples on how you did that? This is a good one. I have it, but I'll let you all go
So
first.
it's just you. So you get to make that decision and fire them, right?
For me as an individual consultant?
Well, yeah, because you have your own organization, so you get to make that. So if like for somebody like me, I have to go to my management and say, hey,
yeah.
right. So I get to make that. I get to have that call, but I got to call Denny and be like, hey, we got to talk. This is X, Y, and Z is happening. I need some guidance on how to help rectify this situation, or what's going on. For me, I usually if I have that happen, and that has happened, and so I've had Denny be a part of some of the conversations just so that he can hear things firsthand. And then we make a decision. He and I work together to make a game plan on how to best handle the situation so that one, we can fix the problem at hand and move on.
Yes.
And try to rectify any, maybe if there's a relationship issue or anything like that we try to fix that.
Yeah, for me as an individual, it's been a pretty rare occurrence, because as consultants, our number one goal, I think, is to affect positive change in an organization, whether it's people or technology.
I'd agree.
Right? And so I think we're probably all pretty good at dealing with confrontational people and solving those problems. So as consultants, I think that's what kind of started off with. That's what drives success, is people. But recently I had to actually do this at some time in the past recently. And but the thing that I had to deal with was there was a third consultant group in the equation. So it was like customer, me, and the other consulting group. And so I kind of took a roundabout approach to it. I was like, hey, consulting group X, what do you think about taking over my responsibilities in this project? And they're like, that's a good idea. And so I kind of just moved on. So I didn't really solve the problem, but I wanted to make sure that the customer still had the service levels that they needed to be successful from the skills that I brought to the table, and that another organization was willing to take it over. So I haven't had to directly fire anybody, but you have to be successful. You have to be happy, right, in doing what you do. It's such a huge element. So yeah, I don't.
For us, it's happened a few times. And as John mentioned, it's not solely my decision. I'm reaching out to Paul to saying, hey, this is a challenge that I've run into, or that we're having with a particular client, and get his feedback. He's always been extremely supportive. It happens, I think, most frequently for us because of a misunderstanding and expectation. And traditionally, we're seeing that on the client side. We don't provide 24/7 support. We're not on call. So when someone sends us an email, if we're available, then we're going to help. But if we're not available, then you may not get a response from me for a few hours, maybe even a business day. And if you send me another email 3 hours later, and then you send my boss an email 2 hours later, expecting, wanting to know and demanding that I'm available, we have a communication problem, obviously, and an expectation problem. And so if we can't resolve that, then we basically just say, I don't think that we're a good fit for this. So that has had to happen, unfortunately, a couple times. And we try to get it resolved, right? We try to remind what our guidelines are, because we state that very clearly in the beginning. We revisit those. And if that's not acceptable, then we amicably part ways.
Yeah,
So
expectations management is so huge.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Matt. I'm sorry.
So to kind of riff off that, this is something I've been curious about, because it's a spot that I've been put in a handful of times. How do you manage if the manager or executive or whatever that brought you in comes in and says, hey, what do you think of my team? Or more pointedly, what do you think of person X? What are your thoughts on them? Wink, wink. Like how, I know how I've handled it in the past, and I'm curious if it's happened, and when it has, how do you handle that? How do you toe that line?
So that just happened to me, where they've asked me to kind of evaluate their team. Hey, you've been working with my team. You've seen X, Y, Z. What do you really think the caliber of my team is, this individual or whatever? And I'm pretty blunt, as you guys know, many of you guys know me, I kind of say what I
No.
want to say. So I
You-
just kind of directed, do you want the blunt, real answer? Or are you looking for a political answer? You know, because we have this type of relationship.
Yep.
Like, okay, well, here's the issues I'm seeing with code or with this way of things being done. I think this person would, you know, benefit from this kind of training, or maybe this is not the right place where this person is going to fit. And I'm pretty blunt with them. Now, if they have a really stellar person, I'm going to point out this person is your rock star.
Yep.
They probably should be getting more responsibility. They've done really great, wonderful to interact, and give the accolades for that.
Yep.
But they're hiring me for my expertise in something. They want my opinion. That's what consulting is. You know, they want
Yep.
our opinion. So I really try to give them that feedback so they can make an actionable decision if they need to.
I will. I've agree with all of that, done all of that. The same thing on the accolades. I think it's really important to promote those folks that you work with for a client who are outstanding and doing a great job. I love, those are my favorite emails to send. There have been a couple times where we have sent an email to a manager saying, hey, I'm a little concerned about this person because they make a recommendation, or they are repeatedly making recommendations that don't have good data behind them, or that we really disagree with, or are fundamentally incorrect, and have said, we would recommend limiting their access because we're concerned about the decisions they could potentially be making. That's very rare. Like, I can think of 2 times that it's happened in 8 years. But again, as Monica said, as a consultant, right, we're there to provide feedback and instruction where we can.
Mhm.
Okay, you guys want to go with that one a little bit more, or you pull from the stack? What do you guys think? Good.
Let's pull from the stack. There's some questions out here pending.
Yeah.
There's one that I found really interesting here is, if you get a gig from another consultant, or an introduction or a recommendation, do you pay the consultant that recommends you? You know, what's really cool, I think, in working with all of you is that there's kind of consultant undercurrent that's out there. And if there's some work that we know SQL Skills might be really good at, we'll kick the work to them. Or if Anthony has something that he knows that John is really good at, he'll say, hey, John, I got something, I think it's right up your alley. And we kind of toss that work around because we know who has the specialties in what.
Yep.
And we do that. And I think it's kind of a give and take on that. What about you guys? Do you guys see that too?
Well, yeah, and I think to kind of flip that around, if you are looking for a consultant and you've gone to an event, you know, normally in person, but like this, and you went to a session, and whether the person's a consultant or not, I think a good question to ask is, hey, my company needs some work in this area. I know that you're not a consultant. Can you recommend people? Because you're right, there is kind of that undercurrent where, you know, like, well, these 10 people are really good at this, and, you know, maybe you're not at liberty to do that, and you can't take side work, and you're not a consultant, but you'll plug those people in to the right folks. So that can be a good and pretty easy way. You know, you don't have to call a bunch of places and say, do you have person X, Y, and Z, and listen to a sales spiel and all that. You can just say, I need somebody who does this, and speaker, consultant or not, is generally going to point you the right way.
Yeah, I think for me as an individual consultant, I have to pull from skills from other organizations, because I, one, don't have time to necessarily invest in learning a particular thing to come up with a solution. Anything on the reporting side of the house, there's one company I call, and it's this one on the other side of the screen here, DCAC. So that's good. You know, if it's, that's kind of the way of the world. Not to say the way of the world, like that sounds awkward, but
Well, you can't be an expert in
leveraging our
everything, right?
what's that?
No.
You can't be an expert in everything. Like,
No,
it's
no.
it's okay. Like, I get it. Yeah.
There's one of the questions I saw, it might have flown by, was I think something about vetting consultants. That's filter number 1. If they act like they know everything, right?
Oh, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tell people on a scoping call, like, if someone asks about analysis services, I'll be like, that's not our bucket. Like, I'll
Yeah.
tell you what I don't know, because there's no way that I want to try to recommend something or design it and then try to support it or help you with it. Like, that's just insanity.
Yeah. Agreed.
That's
Yeah,
why
that
we
was the question, was what questions should we be asking when vetting a potential consultant? And if you're getting those, the consultant knows everything about everything. Oh, I joke similarly. And now my joke is about reporting services. Someone asked me if I knew reporting services. I was like, I installed it once, and then I realized I installed it and uninstalled it because it was an accident. Right.
Well, so like,
So-
I think that's a good point, that I would want to know, you know, if somebody's asking that question, if your consultant can't tell you what they don't know, or where they're not strong in. Like if somebody asks me, I'm with Aaron, and I tell this in my presentations, like I'm a DBA. Give me encryption, compression, corruption, backups. I can support analysis services. Don't ask me to write a Power BI report or design a cube. No.
Right.
If your consultant can't tell you that, again, that's why we have Megan, because I call Megan.
And it's okay to interview your consultants.
Oh, totally.
Should.
Oh, yeah.
Totally.
Just don't go
Yeah.
and say, hey, this person told me about DCAC and I want to use them for a migration. Well, get in touch with Denny or whatever team you guys decide to and find out who you would be assigned. And then interview us and then make decisions. It's okay to say, hey, they're not the right fit. Give me somebody else on your team. Or can you recommend someplace else? Because we want to make sure you're successful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if it's a longer term, that's even more important because that culture fit is key. I mean, I came off a couple long-term projects where I was basically embedded in a team, and the one project, they basically interviewed me, and so we knew it would be a good fit. And we all got along well. The other project, they didn't, and got along well with most. I'd like to think I'm easy to get along with. That may or may not be true, but there were a couple people on the team that there was a lot of friction there from their side, because basically they'd never talked to me. So you didn't get a chance, and maybe they would have asked for somebody different. But yeah, for those longer term projects, culture fits are really important because you're going to be embedded in that team for a while.
Yeah. And if you're looking for like that one question to ask, I actually have one interview question that I ask anybody especially for technical interviews. Tell me about your most recent or favorite project. And that should start hopefully an hour-long conversation. And in that conversation, then if somebody like I'm talking to John, and he's like, oh, I'm an expert at corruption. All right, let's jam out about that and dig a little bit deeper. And you can kind of get a feel for, one, what they're excited about and what they want to talk about, and two, what they're really good at. Because if they're just going on and on and on, and it's an interesting, fantastic, technically deep conversation, then you're going to get a feel for what they're really good at. If you just kind of ask bullet point, surgical, like pinpoint questions, like, what's page header OX22 FD4 do? That's not going to get you any understanding of what they really know. That's just trivia, right?
Yep.
So that's usually my favorite and interview question to ask. Your best or most recent project that you've worked on.
And so, picking your consultant and you said, like vetting them and stuff. I think one of the things too, somebody's asking questions about hourly rates and stuff like that. I think depending on what you're looking for, it's not always best to go with the most expensive or the cheapest. Everybody's got a budget for a project. Sometimes when you go with the cheapest one, you get what you pay for, right? And then you end up having to hire your next level to fix what they couldn't even accomplish, or they had issues. Or maybe you've got a really new consultant who has started up their own business and they don't know what to properly rate themselves as, which leads to the question, how do you come up with your hourly rate? And what should you be charging? But, sticker price sometimes matters on the caliber of the consultants you're going to get too. So what do you guys think on that?
So when I got started, I had a longer term contract with a single customer. And at the end of that contract, I went to that customer and said, hey, I like real like timidly, I'm like, I'd like to raise my rate a little bit. And the CIO of the org is who I reported to. And he's like, took you long enough. I was like, what? Because I was giving him a cheap rate, but they had also given me a huge bucket of work. So that's the balance, right?
Right.
And so after that conversation, I basically, and I was just testing the market. Every new client that came along, I incrementally increased my rate until I started getting pushback from customers. Like, ooh, that's a little too high. Like, oh, all right, well, if we can work with that a little bit. And so that was kind of my way of figuring out what the market could sustain for the services that I provided. But setting that initial rate is extremely challenging, especially if you're brand new, because you just don't have any data, right? And so talk to your friends and look at the market and see what other folks are charging, and then figure out what your market is. Because even though we kind of all do the same thing, we kind of have our own niches in the markets that we operate in, whether it's a business vector like healthcare or legal or financial, because you kind of operate in those communities too, and they might even within that have different rates. And so just do your market analysis to take in all of those different vectors.
It's a great answer. I have nothing to add to that. Great answer.
The only thing I have to add to that is I'm glad that I don't set our prices, because when
Yeah,
I've done
it's tough.
side work before, I've always underestimated my own value and what I
Oh.
know. So I am super thankful that, Denny and the admin staff of the, corporation, Denny and Chris basically, and Elijah, they're the ones that set the prices. Because when I did side work, I always underestimated my value.
Let me grab onto a point there too, then, John. As an individual, there's two things going against you when you negotiate for yourself. One, your job's to please your client, right? So you as an individual are gonna be like, you know what, that's cool. We'll just sign a contract, no big deal. But if you have someone else negotiating their contract, like a salesperson or a contract team, they won't have that emotion that you have. Because as you know, I think I'm
Totally.
gonna put us all in a similar personality bucket. Is our job is to make our clients happy, not be hard-nosed in a contract negotiation. And so that's two different skills. And so having someone else negotiate your contracts for you is extremely valuable. But like for me, I don't have that opportunity, that luxury as an individual consultant. I don't have a team. That's by design. That's how I want to run my business. But yeah, that's super valuable. That your experience, John, there.
All right, what's next?
I have one. Why don't one of you guys pick one? Or do you have the questions up, or is it just me?
I have them up too, but go ahead. You're doing great.
Yeah.
You're run with
agree.
it.
I like this one. Actually, I want to know the answer to this one from all of you all. And it's from
Okay.
Megan. It's how many
Oh.
clients do you usually work with at a time? And how do you manage both your time management and communication time constraints with those clients? That's a hard question, or good question. Good question.
That it depends, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it is flooded. I have no time to breathe. I do a lot of performance tuning. That's my thing. I absolutely love it. And sometimes I'll have my retainer clients. Retainer clients has a set amount of hours per month, per week, or whatever. I love doing those. So I have several of those. And then we'll get a pop in of somebody who needs some performance tuning or they need some help. And that kind of gets thrown in. And it could be a catastrophic help where you've got to give them all of your time plus manage your retainers. Sometimes it's here or there. So it's like feast or famine. You can have just a nice steady flow and then all of a sudden, bam. So I don't think number matters.
Yeah, it's so true, right? Like I have one customer that I've worked with since I started. So for 8 years. And then I have some others that have just been long-term where, as Monica said, like there's just work that gets done on a regular basis. And right now I have a bigger project that I'm working on, which is a big chunk of my time every single week. So I'm fitting those in around that. And then there's the customers that I worked with. I just had one the other day. I worked with this customer in 2013 and they sent an email and they're like, hey, found your address, having an issue. Can you help? And I'm like, sure. But then I have to figure out how to fit that in amongst everything else. And sometimes I can't. Sometimes I'm pulling in somebody else from the team, which is one of the things that I love. Even though we have a smaller team, like that's one of the things that I really appreciate is that I can ping somebody else and say, hey, do you have time to look at this? And they'll do the same. Or if it's something that's not my favorite thing, if somebody wants to talk about service broker, I'm like, I'm going to pass you off to Jonathan because you don't want me answering those questions.
So I'll tag on to that. The other thing that I have liked is most of my clients, they're understanding because at some point in time, they are probably going to have their own production issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to dedicate more time to them when that happens, when they might call me and say, hey, John, we want some of your time. And I'll be like, yes, I'll be happy. Communication, I think, is key in those type of situations of, yes, I will help you tomorrow. I will help you X, Y, and Z. Or, hey, Monica, do you have time? Or Denny or Joey or somebody, can you help out if you got time? If not, because I have another fire that I'm trying to put out right now. And as soon as I get that taken care of, I'll come back to you.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would say probably every single one of my clients is understanding in that dynamic, because at some point in time they're going to have an issue and I'm going to have to spend time with them, dedicate them, and then tell my other clients, you got to wait, I got to help them.
So here's the thing, kind of now that I've stepped away from consulting, is it fair to ask how many other projects my consultant is involved in, or fair to ask the amount of pre-sales they're doing? Because the last two places that I worked, we were dedicated to a single project at a time. But people at a certain level, whatever the role was named, were expected to do a fair amount of pre-sales. So, you're giving that client 40 plus, and then you're giving pre-sales quite a bit as well. and sometimes that can come across like, oh, you look tired on this call, and those sorts of things. Like, is it fair to ask? And also, is it fair to say that's none of your business?
You're
I'm not
hiring us. That's an interview question.
Yeah.
But I think that's okay for the consultant to say, well, that's private information. You don't. I mean, what's important is that we will take care of you in one way or another. Now, I've been, maybe I'm lucky. I've never had a client ask me that question. Like, they know based off the number of hours they have signed up for my time in a month, they know that I've got other clients going.
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm not shy about that. Hey, yes, I will be happy to help you, but I need to schedule that because I'm in the middle of another client problem or project. And to me, one of the biggest things working with a consultant is communication.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
We have to be able to communicate effectively of saying, and manage our time. This kind of goes back to Megan's question. We have to be able to manage our time and be upfront with our clients about, yeah, I can work on you. And this is when I'm going to plan on working on your tasks, next Monday, next week, this week, whatever. But we have to have that communication.
Well,
now
and
we're all pretty busy. A follow-up question to that, Matt, and I can kick that to you and probably Anthony, because you guys, especially Anthony, has his own business here. Are you ever worried about running out of work? Now, so far for COVID
Every
with
day.
us, we've been crazy busy. It's like picked up like nuts. But for running your own business, do you ever worry about that feast or famine type part?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm going to tie the last question and this question together. Both time, it's a combination of time management, rates, and pipeline. One of the core tenets that I maintain for revenue in my organization is that no single thing is responsible for more than 25% of my revenue. Because if one of those things goes away, I can survive on 75% of my revenue. I also maintain a large reserve in savings because I also need to get through any famines that might occur. And so that's all like, I don't want to say basic stuff, but foundational stuff that you have to cover day one. So that ties in with time management and how you allocate your time to customers or projects, right? If you have to make sure that your revenue streams are diverse, then that goes into how you allocate your time to projects. And that can be, you can do month-long projects. You can do maybe hours per month where you have like retainers, and it's how you architect your business. And really that's going to be a function of like, what can you get from the market? And that becomes interesting there. Another thing to tap into what John said a few minutes ago is also establish an emergency rate. Because if somebody calls 1-800-DCAC or 1-800-SQL Skills or whomever, and they need you to drop everything to work on that thing, okay, my emergency rate is 2x. Then they're serious, and because what you're doing at that point is you pretty much are guaranteeing that you're going to be working on the weekend to make up that time that you just spent on that emergency, right? And so that goes into that calculation. So those are really kind of three big buckets of time management, rate management, and kind of feast or famine, like making sure you have a pipeline and all those things. And then back to the client question from earlier, that's a big part of it too, is just making sure that you're constantly out there telling people, this is what I'm good at and my domain expertise, et cetera. So let's see.
So do you want
Easy
to,
question. That's not an easy question.
there's two
Okay.
questions there that are kind of about starting into consulting. I don't know if we want to tackle those. They've been out there for a little bit, but the first one
Okay.
is, what's your suggestion for someone who would want to take their career path as an individual consultant in, let's say, 6 months, et cetera? And my, Anthony, I think you're probably well suited to answer that, but my initial thought is, I don't know that 6 months is enough runtime, right? To get
Especially
going
right now.
Yeah, like, and I think you have to, like, I'm not a business person, right? I'm a technical person. I'm a do person. Like, just tell me what needs to be done and I'm happy to do that. So I think you definitely have to have a certain mindset to run your own business, right? Tell me if I'm wrong there, but I feel like that. And then there's some amount of, right, planning in terms of like, not just how you're going to run your company, but how you're going to get yourself known, right? And
Yeah.
how you're going to market or become available. So I don't know, your guys' thoughts there.
Well, so I was actually going to riff off that, and then Anthony, I guess I'll give it back to you. I was going to riff off that in case the question was broader, like I want to be a consultant. How do I do that?
Got it.
And for me, the way was, and it wasn't intentional at first, it was to be involved in events like this. Go to SQL Saturdays, go to local groups, go to Past Summit, because the connections you make here, that's what opens those doors. And what it ended up being for me is, I was in a job that I liked with people I liked, but it was stagnant. It was a system we had designed and we supported, and you're not expanding your skills. And I reached a point where I wanted to do that. And I was tired of waking up overnight fixing stuff. And those doors were open because of SQL Saturdays I was at, people I met at Summit, and those sorts of things. So if the broader question is, I want to jump from what I'm in to a consultant role, this is the best way to do it, because not only will you're kind of forced into doing the networking that opens those doors, but you're also going to know when your skill sets stop, who you can ask, who you can DM or text or whatever and say, hey, I haven't worked on X in a while, but I know that's your thing. I have a client that they're stuck on it. What do I do? So broadly, that's my answer. And I guess back to the independent consulting, over to you, Anthony, whichever way you are.
So when I started, and I don't mean to make this just totally about me, sorry. I had to establish what I wanted out of my company. And a good friend of mine started his consulting firm at the same time. And he asked me this question. He's like, when you sit down at night, what do you read? I'm like, I'm reading engineering documents. I'm reading, Microsoft articles, tech books, lots of books. And he's like, well, I read the Harvard Business Review and I'm doing all this stuff. And we had two different ways of how we viewed our consulting company. He's got 50 some odd employees. I still have me, right? Because the idea is I want to just work on cool stuff, right? And I can, whatever tech it is that I want to get my hands on. And that's the thing. And my friend was easily as technically excellent. I don't say I'm technically excellent, but he's a very technical person and had all the chops to be able to do all the engineering stuff, but he just wanted to grow a company and do all of those things. And I have no interest in doing any of that because of lots of different reasons. And one of the people that helped me really establish that was actually Paul at SQL Skills. I was in the mentoring class in 2015, and he'd been consulting for years. So I kind of had a short circuit, right? Of like, hey, how did you handle this? Or how do you do this? And we jammed out over an entire year on how, like, he pretty much just asks you really hard questions. And then you think about the answers to those questions and what you really want out of a company. And so that's a big thing, is just talk to somebody. Like, we're all talking about like conferences and SQL Saturdays and things like that. Totally true. But having a mentor or someone that's done it before to just talk to is a huge asset.
So were you able to ask him questions like, when you invoice a client, if they don't pay after you've done the work, how do you deal with that kind of stuff? We've got somebody asking a question, have we ever done work and then had to walk away from the project, one, either from non-payment and the project's not done, or you did all this work, you invoiced them, and then now you got nothing.
Have a lawyer.
I agree.
Seriously.
Yes, it's happened. To answer that question, it does happen, right? It's happened, I think, to all of us.
Yep, it happens.
Yeah.
That's why you have contracts. Charge interest on late payments, and then they'll get really excited to pay.
Because you are running a business.
Right.
It's your livelihood. So.
And one thing that people forget, and so I do my own billing, is it takes you time to chase down customers. So if you're chasing out someone who hasn't paid you, what are you not doing?
Billing. Working. You're not making
right. So it literally costs you money to do those things. And so that's why it's totally valid to charge interest against a late payment.
Yeah. I mean, another thing to remember, especially in all of our scenarios, is that you're also spending time to get them in the door in the beginning, right? Like, you have initial engagement calls, right? Or scoping calls, and you're setting that up, and there's back and forth about contracts. Like, that's time that you're not billable, right? That someone has to handle. And if it's a one-person show, then you're all of that, from start all the way to end. In our scenario, we have somebody who does that, but sometimes I'm doing scoping calls, right? So that means I'm not available to work with my clients because I have to do this other stuff. And it ebbs and flows, right? And it's just kind of the nature of the business.
So just to follow up on another question, kind of changing things, travel in time that you guys actually go and physically pre-COVID, physically sit with the client. Now I've had clients and I've never had to do a client visit. I'm able to do my stuff remote. And for the 5 years I've been consulting, I have yet to set foot in a client's building, which I think is fantastic. But depending on the engagement, how often are you guys traveling? Anthony, are you having to do anything with Kubernetes where you actually have to go and sit with them?
Not now, obviously, but in the times before. I actually, because I kind of fill a lot of different roles as a consultant, is I customer relationship management, the whole 9 yards.
Mhm.
So I'll go and try to go to a client site quarterly.
Oh, wow.
Because you're going to sit with teams, right?
Mhm.
And usually the projects that I'm involved in kind of require that to get, 3 or 4 or 5 people in a room, whiteboard a solution, come up with a plan. And then that has the added benefit of, you can talk to this leadership in the organization, you can have a cup of coffee. And I try to, if I can't do that in person quarterly, then we at least are going to do it over the phone or something like that to maintain the relationship with the customer, right?
I
Yeah,
think that also, go ahead, Matt.
there are some projects this year that I wished we could have met because things would have gone smoother. It gets back to kind of, knowing what the vibe of the group is. And I know this year, like, we were under restriction. We absolutely couldn't go. Even if I said, like, this engagement will be so much better if I could just go sit in the room with these people. It's a flat no. But there are those clients, and you're right. There's some where you never have to set foot in there, and that works well. But there are some where that doesn't. It's not really a thing right now. But
Mhm.
there are other ways to connect. Like, we would take one of our weekly stand-ups. The first 15 minutes is we would just kind of chat. Hey, what's going on? Just kind of an open chat, and even that little bit helped because any rapport that you can build, especially with clients like that where the it's not a good vibe, every little bit helps. And I think it's okay. It's okay to take a little time and engage personally, even though you can't really be out having a beer or a coffee right now.
So I got two thoughts about the travel thing, especially for individuals that want to get into consulting. If you're not going to do it on your own, like an individual like Anthony's doing, have that conversation with the person who's hiring you. Like when I joined Denny, I've got 2 kids. I'm a single dad. I got 2 kids. They're very important in my life, and I want to be around. And so I had that conversation with Denny about what's the travel expectations, what's going to happen. Now, I've had to travel for clients. Most of the time we are home. Even before pre-COVID, we stayed home. We didn't travel all that much. Let me rephrase that. We did travel. I was not one of the ones that would always travel. Now, there were projects where Denny would call and say, hey, we want somebody on site. Can you make it? Yep, I can make that work. Facilitate a schedule with their mom and be totally cool. So having that conversation is important. Also, ask what the travel policy is. I'm not going to stay in the cheapest hotel. I'm not, that traveling, especially a lot for a consulting engagement. I used to know a guy that was a consultant, and he traveled like 25 days out of a month. I mean, it was crazy.
Oof.
Oh,
Yeah, it was horrible. Like it was traveling. He was traveling so much, he actually didn't have an apartment. And so when he would go to his home base, he would actually go stay with family. He did not have a house. He didn't have a car.
Oy.
He traveled that much, and he worked for a very large monolithic organization that their travel policy sucked. He flew the cheapest airline. He stayed in the cheapest hotels. He had a very low per diem. All that is important. So have that conversation and know what you're walking into if you're going to be a consultant for organization and you are required to travel. I'm not going to fit in an economy car. I mean,
Yeah.
I just don't. I mean, I can wear them as a hat. Just
So that's one thing I love about Denny Cherry Associates, right?
Absolutely.
One of his big things is travel can't suck.
Travel can't suck.
We've got one of the best travel policies that I know about, and we're lucky. So when you're looking to work for a consulting firm, right, asking exactly the time of travel, how you travel, are you having to foot the bill first and you're being reimbursed? Do you get a company credit card? All of that stuff is huge. We do know some consultants in this field that have to foot the bill first. And then some of them don't even get paid until the client pays the company. There's lots of different rules out there good and bad when you're looking into doing this, especially when you're going to a firm, that you need to be asking this. Travel is a big expense and it's a big time consumer away from your family or what other obligations that you have. It's a big thing, a lot more than just going to visit a client.
So that's a really good actual point about the time away.
Mm-hmm.
It is our policy at Denny Cherry Associates that if I'm traveling and my sons have a birthday, the company will fly me home to be home for my son's birthday, or significant other, right? You know, if I was married or whatever, they would fly me home or fly my family out to me, you know, whatever.
Correct.
That's in the handbook. That to me, that tells me that the company values the employees and their time with their family. And that was a huge selling point when I, you know, wanted to get back into consulting and whatnot. That was the right thing to do. And it's the right thing to ask about. So don't be afraid to ask that question because it's your time, it's your family you're going to be away from.
And that's the flip side too, right? When you want to bring a consultant on, you know, what's your company's policy for paying the consultant's travel, or what's written in their contract that is required for them to come on site? You know, there's two pieces to the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
we put that's part of our engagement. Like all of that is laid out up front in terms of what the total costs are and the number of days that we are. So there's no surprises. And so we actually don't have to submit receipts like the hotel or whatever. It's just a rate that covers all of that.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I've gotten in the habit of I don't bill for food because I like food and I don't want to have to answer any questions on invoices. Right.
We all like food.
So, we all like
one key thing about billing, I often get work through other organizations, much like you guys might, right? Referrals and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of touched on a little bit about expenses, but this is kind of a cash flow management thing. So if you're doing a subcontractor job for another org, which I do pretty commonly, don't ever tie yourself to them getting paid, right? Meaning if they have 30-day terms to pay the actual client to pay the contracted firm, don't tie your payment to them. Just say, you know what, I'll give you an extra 10 days past that or an extra 2 weeks past that. Because it just decouples the two things, especially from a cash flow standpoint, then you know when you're expecting to see that money. And that goes to expenses too. If you have a $3,000 trip on your credit card and you have to wait 45 days to get paid, that means you got to foot that bill so you don't have to pay interest that month. And so just little things, like little tips, right?
Well, and to add to that, another about travel, one of the things I've worked as a consultant in a previous life, and managing travel expenses was a small nightmare. Their process to manage the expenses was horrible. Whereas with Denny and Denny Cherry Associates, we take a picture with our phone, we upload it to a folder in SharePoint, and the accountant does the rest.
No offense. I'm gonna one better you. It's a credit card, and that's all I gotta do.
Well, so we have a corporate card, right?
Yeah,
so
but you gotta say I don't have to do a picture. You gotta do a picture.
We just do a picture.
For receipts,
they tie the receipt to the actual transaction, which I get, but the process literally is swipe, receipt, picture. While I'm standing in Starbucks or at the restaurant, I toss the receipt and away I go. And there is no expense report. There's no time I have to waste in an expense report. And that for me, that was important to understand that process when I wanted to get back into consulting, because there have been shops where I've had to spend hours going through some sort of reimbursement process.
Not billing.
This is
billing.
right. Not billing.
Yep.
This, I mean,
Taping receipts. Have you all taped receipts? Right? You have to tape receipts, and I so do not miss that.
I've had to use binders before. You know, the black binder clip things. Like I've before in a previous life where I would shove the receipts in the binder and throw the binder in my backpack because the employer always wanted the receipts, like paper copy.
So to change the subject just a little bit,
enough about money.
The engagement itself. Let's talk about scope creep. Okay, so there's several pieces to this. How do you handle when you write an SOW, a statement of work, that this is your deliverable and this is what's going to happen, and all of a sudden they start asking for more, or they start asking questions because they know you're the expert that's outside the scope of what the SOW is, or they're getting close to the hours they've asked for in the project and you're still going. How do you handle all of that?
You stop.
I'm going to say something I was going to say something pretty controversial, actually. My job is to make my customer happy. And however that is, I'll do it within reason, right?
Well, and I would agree that, if they're asking questions, I'm willing to answer the questions, but if it's going to be
Yeah,
25 hours worth of work and or questions, then I have to
Right.
correct.
rethink about how I have to engage that customer to make them happy. I
Mhm.
totally agree with that. But then I have to make sure that I take care of my base because I work for somebody else and they expect me to make money. I can't give that away all the time. I mean, I've had clients call me and say, hey, I got a couple questions. Can I take 15 minutes? Yeah, you're a good
It's
client.
never 15 minutes.
Right, well, it's never 15 minutes. But at the same point, it's in those instances, I also have retainer clients. So when they call me, I bill them.
Right.
So
Well,
if they
so
got questions, you're using your time that you bought there, Mr. Client. So
Mhm.
we're
Yeah.
going to go ahead and bill that. If you go above them, if you got a 15-minute question above and beyond what you already paid for, I can get by with 15 minutes. But if it's going to be involved, then I need to do something else. I renegotiate that statement and say, hey, we need to add on to the statement of work. We need to extend something. That's what I do.
Well, and so to kind of take the customer's role in that, and I think it actually makes sense for both parties, is I would want my consultant involved in creating the SOW. Almost every engagement that I was on as a consultant where the scope creep turned into a big argument, it was because the SOW is purely between sales, who's trying to close the deal, and the customer, who's obviously trying to get everything that they want, and they should. But there was no really technical analysis of what went down. And so then you walk in and they're like, well, we need you to do this on 100 servers, or we need you to do these 100 things. And the SOW is so vague because sales just want to close the deal, get their number for the month or whatever. You, as a customer, you should want your consultant involved in the maybe final meetings about how that's worded, and know that it's clear with them. Because if it's not, it'll end in tears for somebody, or maybe everybody.
Okay, you want to grab?
Okay, this is kind of, somebody I think is asking a follow-up question to what we're just now talking about. Are we talking like a fixed project that scope creeps, or are we talking about, an amount of hours or a specific like performance tuning thing that scope creeps into something else, or what kind of things are we referencing here?
I think both, right? I mean, if I do something like a fixed price gig for us is an audit, right? A health audit, certain number of hours, certain rate, et cetera. If in the course of that, they're also like, oh, hey, we're having this performance issue, et cetera, I'm going to be upfront and say, this is the number of hours that we have that I can work within. Hold on. And you're going to have to choose, right? Or we're going to have to extend your statement of work, which extending the statement of work is really easy, right? Just adding more time onto that. So that's how I approach it from that direction. If it's just a bucket of hours that we have for tasks and we've outlined what those tasks are, and then they start asking for other ones, again, it comes back to, can I fit it in, right? And make that work. So I'm happy. Anthony, I think your answer is a good one, right? I do want to help the clients. I do want to solve the problems, but I have to be respectful and mindful of the statement of work that's been established and what they're, again, expecting in terms of paying and what I have been asked to do. So it's as John said, right? Communication.
Yeah, that's a super valid point. And it's interesting to hear all of your different perspectives and how your businesses operate. And because we were all trying to do different things as organizations. So no, it's super valuable to hear. Yeah, I'm not going to say like a wild, wild west about it, but for example, like especially in a fixed bid project, which I try to avoid, you're here to do this like very laser focused thing. And anytime you're doing anything else is going to eat into your profit margin for the reason why you put that thing as a fixed bid. Because the reason why you do fixed priced engagements is to maximize profit, because you're probably really good at whatever that fixed price thing is, right? You probably got code to optimize it. And that's how you're going to extract the most revenue out of a particular thing, right? The profit out of a particular thing. So I got my lack of business skills when I mix up revenue and profit.
Sorry, you sound good to me.
Okay, so there's a big question in here about replication and ETL and T-SQL and taking that and running with that as a consultant. And I want to address that question a little more abstractly, in that if you're really, really good at something, someone's going to probably pay you to do that thing, right? And defining that niche. Actually, I wrote a blog post a couple of years ago And the number one thing on the blog post about starting a consulting practice is defining your niche. Like, what's that thing that you're really, really, really good at? And how do you go about doing that is all the stuff that we talked about earlier, blogging and speaking and outbound marketing and interfacing with people. I think that's, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, you have to become known for a thing, and events like this and SQL Saturdays and user groups are that, because you do bounce around, right? And then you turn into, well, that's, and almost everybody I know in this, their career has evolved, whatever their main expertise or whatever they were known for years ago, that changes over time because our field is so dynamic. But yeah, that's thing number one is, get that elevator pitch down. Like, yeah, I think I'm really good, even if it's not your nature, like it's not mine to say I'm really good at whatever. Work on that and kind of get that down and say, you turn into a session or whatever, but be able to tell somebody I'm really good at X and Y, and you want me working on those for you.
Do you think, I'm raising my hand, this is what my kids do. Do you think that, it's a habit in my house. Do you think that you have to be a speaker to be a consultant?
No, but it helps. I think a lot helps.
It does
I don't think
help.
you have to though.
It's
Yeah.
all about exposure, right?
It is.
It's building your brand. It's building your name. It's building on DCAC for us. So when we're speaking, we have DCAC here. We have our cards that have it. You're building that reputation. Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
You're building that reputation on whatever skill it is.
Yep.
You're going to come to my performance tuning sessions, and maybe Monica for performance tuning. Oh, maybe I should call DCAC, right? That's how they put that relationship to, got Aaron with Query Store. Hey, I've got a Query Store problem. Aaron, SQL skills. That's what I'm going to do. And how do we know that? From the blogs, from her speaking on those particular topics, whether they're in person doing training events or these virtual events, right? You begin to associate particular skills with a particular brand, whether that's a person or a company.
So to dial it back 20 years, not so to address what you said, Aaron, about you have to speak. No, but think about 20 years ago, how we consumed content, right? Books. So Kaylin Delaney, Mark Van Assey, like we probably all owned a book written by one of those folks, right? And that's, I've met both of them at conferences and like totally fanboyed. I was like, hi, my name's Anthony. That's those are the people that are the foundation of our careers, I think. So no, it doesn't have to be speaking, but you have to get out there so people know that you're the expert at that thing, right?
Yeah. I agree. So we've got a question out here from Ree, who says, does Anthony consider Kubernetes his niche, or does he do general database consulting? Can you tell us a little bit about that, Anthony?
Oh man, I feel like that might have been somehow communicated to the audience in some way outside of this.
No,
that's not rigged,
no, of course,
sir.
With emerging, so as consultants and as MVPs, we want to play with cool stuff, right? But there's also stuff that pays the bills. Let's be serious, right? And we go to conferences and we talk about the stuff that we want to work on, but there's still stuff that you just have to do that pays the bills, like install SQL servers, like in building automation to do that. Like that was my session yesterday. So no, is Kubernetes like the bread and butter of my consulting practice right now? Drink. It's not, but it's what I want to work on. It's a thing that I've been investing a lot in. And so I think each of us, like we said earlier, is kind of known for a particular thing. And so just owning that as part of your brand is huge.
Well said.
Yeah.
All right. Now the rest of you have to work in Kubernetes to your answers.
That's
You
much
said
harder.
it again. Oh boy.
So there's a question that's been out there for quite a while, and Robert, you've been extremely patient. So Robert asked, are there any tips for overcoming the lack of buy-in? So this was something we talked about, right? Very first question Monica had mentioned, was it Monica that mentioned it? I'm sorry. How long have we been here? Getting buy-in from folks. So when that doesn't happen, right? What do you do?
As best as you can.
Don't politic.
Yeah.
Oh.
Don't play the games.
Yep.
Just be as apolitical as possible. Yeah.
True, but also kind of having those spidey senses attuned to who you can have a conversation with. Say, hey, I'm waiting on such an, where you don't want to be confrontational usually, because, especially on a long-term project, you're going to have to work with those folks for a while,
Mm.
and you're going to need things from them. They're going to need things from you. So you have to get along. But it is very useful to kind of analyze the room, though we're not in a room, and know who works for who, and kind of how the org chart works, and then where the political levers are. And so, not to play those games, but we're trying to get the customer to be as satisfied as they possibly are. And I always thought that was part of my job, to be like, listen, if I have to undo some of your red tape to get us where we need to be, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to figure out who's going to help me do that, instead of just saying, just being a jerk and telling the person like, you're stupid and you're wrong and we should do it my way. You figure out the nice, slightly political way to get that done.
You mentioned politics. I think being a consultant, that's one of the nicest things about, we've all been probably a part of some organization where there's internal politics going on. As a consultant, I get to remove myself from that. Like, I have to deal with, and I will say that we don't have any internal politics going on at Denny Cherry, so which is very, very nice. But I get to remove myself from the internal politics that an organization might have. And so you do have to remove yourself and be like, hey, I'm just here to do X, Y, and Z. I'm here to set up your availability groups or replication, or fix your corruption. Whatever you got going on internally, I'm staying out of that.
But you do have to navigate it, right?
You do have to navigate it, and you have to do so in a professional, adult way.
Yeah.
And navigate that out and be like, hey, I'm out.
Yeah. Have you all ever been brought into this scenario? Sorry, Anthony, where and I've had this happen, where I'm brought in by a technical person, and there's management, right, who said, okay, yeah, we'll do this. But the technical person says to me, this is what I think the problem is. This is what I've recommended, but they don't believe me. And they're like, and you're like, okay. And then you're like, oh yeah, you're right. And you're right. And that's exactly what I would do.
Sometimes you just need another voice
to
amplify you, right? And that's sometimes the reason to bring in a consultant. I know this needs to be done. I've hit every wall possible. Let's get somebody to amplify and make sure I know what I'm talking about. And then we can move forward with the project, right?
Yep.
So I think that's a really interesting point. Even as consultants, and I think somebody said it earlier, when I point this way, I'm pointing to Anthony. So
You're pointing to
Anthony, Monica, Aaron, Matt. That's what it looks like on my screen. But as consultants, I don't know everything, right? And I remember back in the day, when I first met Paul, I've had conversations with Paul, and he's like, I don't know everything about SQL Server. He doesn't know anything about, maybe reporting services or whatever. And that was kind of the light bulb for me. And I have projects where I've run into a problem, I've looked at it, and it's totally okay for me to say, and I've told my client this, look, I had Monica look at it. She didn't see anything wrong with it. I've had Denny look at it. Now we can't, the three of us can't figure out why X, Y, and Z is happening. We're still looking at it, still figuring it out. But me as an individual, and as a consultant, I tell my clients, hey, I'm stuck on it, but I'm asking my other counterparts and Aaron even, I've reached out to Aaron and say, hey, I need some extended events help. She's helped me on things. And I tell my clients that, I don't know everything, but I'm getting the resources in play to make sure we solve their problem.
Yeah. And, to follow up on that, I'll do that when someone's asking me a question and I'm answering it and I'm saying, who has a really good blog post, right? Or, who's done a really good session on that. And I'll send them all of those links, right? Because I want to teach them to fish, right? And if somebody else has a really good blog post out there, like, do you remember the one that Kendra wrote forever about recommitted snapshot isolation, right? The one with the marbles, right? Yep. I've sent that, I don't know how many times, because I can't write anything better than that.
Yep.
So, there's so much great knowledge, not just with all of us, like you guys are wonderful, but in the community, right? Yes. That you just have to step out there and find it and ask for it when you need it.
I actually did that 10 minutes before this session started.
Came out interesting.
Yeah.
Somebody I used to work with in Omaha is starting to get into Power BI, and he reached out on me on LinkedIn and said, hey, can you point me in a direction? I said, yeah, here's Megan's blog site.
Yeah.
Go talk to Megan, because it's not me. Go.
So we're talking about some really great people here, and somebody has a question which I love is when you're starting to build a brand, do you build a brand for yourself, or do you build a brand for a company or attach yourself to a company? And this is what I like to say. I'm SQL Espresso. That's my brand. It's Monica Rathbun. I work for DCAC. That's their brand. There may be someday in my future where I don't work for DCAC, knock on wood, that's anytime soon. However, it's possible that SQL Espresso's got to continue on no matter what company. And I actually started it before I started working for Denny Cherry Associates. So that's my personal brand. I think personal branding is extremely important, and just making sure your company recognizes your brand with inside that company and merges it together. What do you guys think?
That was some of the best advice I got. And I hate the phrase personal branding. Makes my skin crawl because I'm naturally a shy person. I don't market myself, all those sorts of things. But the advice I got as I got into speaking was not only obviously have sessions where you're comfortable and you know the stuff well and have your technical niche, but have a thing that you're known for. I drive race cars, so SQL at speed. And that amazingly has been valuable. Like I've gotten gigs off that. I've gotten offered to speak at things off that because they're like, oh, I saw a session. It's this guy, he races cars, and somebody knows, and off it goes. And they say, oh, would you like to speak at this? Or would you like to come work, for us for a month to do this? So yeah, if you're thinking about getting into consulting, find that technical niche and that Twitter handle personal niche too. Even if you hate it, even if you think it's corny, it really does help at whatever it is. You ski, you knit, you bowl, whatever. Like just you're that you have a bat. Yeah.
But I think you can also, like, to go the other way, like I think you can also just use your name, right? Like that was a decision. Like I remember when I first joined Twitter, which was, I don't even know, friends.
We can go look.
2010, 2011, maybe 2011. Geez, it's been a long time. Like there was a conscious decision, like of using my name or something else. And I remember thinking for me at that time, like it took me a longer time to learn who people were if I had a name and then I had a different handle. So I was like, I'm just going to use my name because that to me was the easiest thing at that time. And then eventually my website was just, my name, and that was easy. So that still sits there, as Monica said, right? AaronStalato.com is still out there. I don't post it as regularly as she posts to SQLespresso.com, but it's there in case it's needed down the road. But otherwise, I'm over at SQL Skills blogging there.
And so I think that's a good point that you put some thought into that.
Yeah.
Just blind, because I just blindly created my. I think I was sitting next to a Toys R Us in my car when I created the account, right? Well, and I like the slogan because and I tell people this, the SQL R Us comes from Toys R Us, everything toys. I touch just about everything. Again, don't ask me to build a report because I can't do it, but I can support most of every facet of SQL Server in some fashion. So that's where it comes from. But I wish that I had done what you had done and thought about it. Played the movie out a little bit further and said, oh, let's think about this 6 months, a year, 10 years down the road if X, Y, and Z happens. So I wish I had done that. So I think that's a really good point as a consultant.
So just following up on this next question, which I think it's great, is do I need to be Microsoft certified to be a SQL consultant or offer database services? Now, this is my thing. I don't think you need certifications. I don't think you need to have any of that. But sometimes, and you guys can argue with me on this, sometimes credentials matter, right?
Yes.
When we go to DCAC, we have 5 Microsoft MVPs. We're all certified in particular things. Denny is an MCM. There's different credibility that goes along with those particular achievements that gives confidence to a client that, hey, I've actually think I've hired somebody that may have some street cred or something with that. But I don't think it's necessarily a must have. What do you guys think?
Yes.
Totally agree.
I don't think it's must have.
I think anything that brings you credibility is what you should have. And if you're at the point of your career where certifications are that's fine. If it's speaking, if it's blogging, if it's whatever it is. But yeah, I don't think there's any threshold where, I didn't get my certifications until I got into consulting and I worked for a gold partner, and you have to have so many whatevers, and they're like, Matt, you're going to be this, you have to study for that. Okay. Whatever shows your potential clients that you're a credible technical resource is what you should go after. And that's going to be different for everybody.
Yeah. In my workings as a consultant, I've only had one client that required it in all the years that I've done it. And then Matt, you talked about the angle of partners, not partnerships. What's it called when you describe like the gold part? Yeah, it is partnership, right?
Yeah,
For
yeah.
Microsoft.
Yep.
That becomes a tangible thing too, saying that I'm a silver, gold, or
Right.
whatever partner for your organization. But that has a lot to do with how big your org is, and then different what's the term that they use? Not
Assets.
expertise, is something like the buckets of expertise that they have for partnership. I forget
Yeah.
what the term is that they use.
Buckets is fine.
Capabilities.
We got
Capabilities sounds boring.
Histograms.
Buckets.
Instagram.
it. Well, when you get this bucket, I think bucketizer, and I think histogram target, and then I go to stats. I mean, just come on.
This is the right crowd for that. Yeah.
I know you
Work.
get it.
Right. So
We all understood what you just
Got the
said.
joke.
I know. I love you all.
then buckets popped up in in-memory OLTP too.
That's true. Hash buckets. Yeah. Actually, I just referenced to Monica's blog 2 days ago, the one that you wrote about all the different indexes you can create in in-memory OLTP objects, because that's not very clear in the documentation. So thank you, by the way, for writing that.
You're welcome. I'm glad somebody can use the blog.
Yeah.
So we've got 5 minutes left. If there's one thing you could talk about briefly about consulting, good, bad, ugly, wish people knew, what would it be?
Oh,
I got
yeah,
one.
go.
Time management, and taking care of yourself.
Oh yeah.
That's right. That's especially now, like today,
Especially now.
in today's environment. But that's when I got started, you say yes to everybody, every client. Yes, yes, yes. And the next thing you know, you're at 120% and you burn out.
Yeah.
Just in the beginning, you're going to say yes a lot, and then you're going to figure out what your maximum threshold is, but then pull back down and just take care of yourself. Time management is such a huge facet of that.
I agree with that, because especially being at home, and because clients are in different time zones or different countries even, that it's very, very simple for me to walk away for the day and someone on the West Coast has something and I'm like, oh, let me go to my desk just for 5 minutes just to do this work so I can get this for this client. When really, I'm East Coast, they understand that they didn't really need it until tomorrow. But because I want to make sure my clients are happy, I quick stop what I'm doing. It's just 5 minutes, then an hour goes by, then they send an email, and then it's a little while longer. Totally get that, Anthony. Your time management is a big thing, because most of us do work from home. Besides this COVID thing, everybody's starting to see that we work from home, and it's easy to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I was a consultant for 5 years and I did a terrible job looking after myself. I probably went through 3 different cycles of gain a whole bunch of weight, work a bunch of it off, then you're in a stressful project again, and off it goes. And, if I could rewind 5 years, like you said, you need to learn when to disconnect and how to do that and still make sure you're getting all your work done, make sure clients are satisfied and all that, but know for you where to draw that line. And that line is going to be different for everybody, how comfortable you are, working long hours or weird hours or whatever, but find where that is, understand it, and then stick to it. And, find a place that will honor that. Cause you will absolutely burn out. And, and you don't realize you're doing it really probably until somebody tells you, partner, friend, whatever. And they're like, hey, you need to dial it back because you're not yourself right now.
And to tack onto that, I think it's important that if you're going to get into consulting and you're going to start to talk to consulting companies or whatnot, not speaking like on your own, like what Anthony's doing, but like I have management support you in that, right? So I've worked in consulting shops where it's a meat grinder. The low hourly rates, but ton of hours, 80, 90 hours a week, and management doesn't back you, then that becomes a problem. Last week, I took some mental days off before Summit this week, and I told Denny, and he's like, see ya, go do it. Yes, go take care of yourself. And that's important to me as an individual, is to make sure my management will back me for my clients when I say, I got to step away for a day or two or X number of hours. Otherwise I'm going to lose it. That's important. So ask those questions of your management, especially if you're going to get into consulting.
Yeah. I think that because we all work from home, again, not just because of COVID, but most of the time it's just how it lends itself. Making sure you reach out to your team members. Like, it's easy to just kind of get stuck in your world. But one of the things that I really miss, even though I'm an introvert, is I miss having a conversation like this, right? To bounce ideas off and just talk through something. And so you have to make a different kind of an effort to do that when you're a consultant. Particularly, Anthony, I don't know how sometimes it is for you when you're all by yourself, right? You just
He talks to us.
yeah.
I really do.
And then I will say that one of my favorite things about being a consultant is the fact that I set my own schedule, and it has taken me a long time to figure out what is best and right, and paying attention to my time and family and all of that, and closing that door when I am done. But the flexibility that I have is like
Invaluable.
yes, cannot
Yeah.
say enough
Yeah.
about it.
Agree.
Totally agree.
Well, cool. I think this is a wrap. I want to thank everyone that put in the valuable questions. Thank you so much. The panelists, Monica, Matt, Aaron, John, very good friends. Excellent answers. Thank you so much for participating in this today.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Thanks everybody for coming. Great
Yep.
talk.